Sex workers at Reddit. Have you ever fallen in love with a John? What happened afterwards? Friend of mine did. She'd been sex trafficked, held against her will to work off her visa and had her passport confiscated. He was a client of hers and when they got close enough she told him her story and he worked with law enforcement to get her out. They've been married over a decade now. This was years ago when I was 21 but it brings back a lot of emotions even now. One of my regulars was a disabled gentleman in his 50s. He had broken his spine in an industrial accident and was paralyzed from the chest down. He'd gotten a large settlement and invested in property including his beautiful accessible cabin on the lake. He'd pay for me to spend weekends with him there as well as trips to the coast and the casino where he would give me money to play slots or see a show while he played cards. He was kind and funny and had a comforting nature. I had bad experiences with men, but his disability made him vulnerable and open in a way that moved me and put me at ease. I even learned some of his care routines so I could be with him for longer periods. He died when he developed a clot in his leg that broke free and got into his lungs. I didn't find out until 2 weeks afterward. His passing really shook me. I thought I had distance. I didn't realize how much I cared for him until he was gone. I did a short stint as a stripper. One night I had an odd guy come tip me while I was on stage and kept trying to get my number. After I got the guy to leave me alone, another man got out of his booth and threw $20 at me praising me for how I dealt with the weirdo. I finished my set on stage and sat down with that guy to thank him and chat. He had his boss in the booth with him and it turns out his boss loves anime as much as I do so we hit it off. I was a part-time stripper so my schedule was inconsistent but boss man always tried to come by and buy me drinks and just chat. He never wanted a lap dance or to go to the back room. Always just wanted to have conversations with me. We talked about anything and everything. We were the same kind of weird. We exchanged numbers shortly before I abruptly left the industry and disappeared for months to try repair the crappy abusive relationship I was in, but we never texted each other. When I was in a dark place surrounded by unsupportive people, I texted him out of the blue asking if he wanted to hang out. He was so excited. According to some of the dancers that worked at the club, in the months after I vanished he would check every weekend to see if I was working and when he didn't see me he would leave. In any case, one date led to another and now we're engaged. We're still working out the perfect alibi for our families on how we met, but most of our close friends know the whole story. I worked as a stripper and fell in love with the manager. I saw girls always fawning over him, leaving some tips on stage so he would bring them back to the dressing room and they could flirt with him. I assumed it was a phase and tried to ignore my feelings. At the time I was suffering from chronic pain and an eating disorder. He just cared so much and went out of his way to help. We've now been married for 15 years and have 3 children. From the customer side, I was in relationship with a sex worker, one of the best of my life. We met as you would imagine, but without going into too many details she was different and I soon became obsessed. I would see her every chance got. I was living in another country at the time so had no real friends and she helped me with a lot of things. Getting an apartment set up and stuff like that. I hoped we were heading for more than a client-customer relationship but did not want to jinx it. One day she did not take the money I left out and when I pointed that out she got upset and basically told me I was an idiot for not noticing that we were now in a relationship. She was a sex worker for a few months and mainly had regular. After that it was just me and her. I loved her and I know she felt the same about me. We were together for a little over a year and even when we broke up we stayed friends. That was over 10 years ago and we stayed in touch after. We have been on holiday together since. She has visited me at home. She has now moved back home, is running a successful business and is getting married soon to a guy who really looks after her. I still care about her and I'm glad that she is happy. Edit. To clarify, when I wrote her soon-to-be husband looks after her I meant he cares about her, not 5 hat he is a sugar daddy like some people have suggested. Related only, but one of my friends with unlimited business expenses was hosting in-nick clients from London. That night ended up at a strip club across the street from my home, and $1,000 in lap dance tickets, $20 each, in the middle of the table. I tried one, not my thing. So I pocketed 3 of the tickets as souvenirs. A year later, my nephew was visiting me as he turned 21, so I gave him the 3 tickets and sent him to the strip club. He did not return. but called at 8 AM. I'm making breakfast over at Dawn's place. They went out for a few months. Using my throwaway, I was a sugar baby the moment I turned 18. Started having sex with a 60-year-old doctor. I was poor, so the constant showering of gifts, money, dinners, vacations, and clothes, I guess, made me fall in love with him. All I would think about was Lonnie, fake name, and what amazing thing Lonnie had planned for us that day. One day I get a call from Lonnie and he tells me we can't see each other anymore because he had caught feelings for me. I took this as my opportunity to tell him how I felt, and I really thought we would get married. He then told me, I can't be in love with a whore, so I have to let you go and move on to another girl I don't have feelings for. I was broken and depressed for a long time. I ended up using some of the money he gave me for therapy, and eventually I got over it. Not the SW, but the partner of one. I was going through a stressful time in my life and things weren't working out the way I had hoped. I was single and was always making time for other people and never felt like I was getting what I wanted in life. I knew nothing about sex workers at the time and had never seen one before. I did some research for about a month or so and came across this girl's ad. She seemed legit, and from what I could see in her pictures, rather attractive. Booked her and was beyond nervous scared leading up to the appointment. When the day came, I went over and the cutest girl ever opened the door and welcomed me in. We talked about ourselves pretty much the entire night. I had only intended for this to be a one-time deal since it's so expensive. Lol. But I decided to see her a few more times. I noticed she started letting me overstay my appointment time more each visit, and I started getting suspicious. I didn't know if this was normal or if she was into me. I liked her a lot, but I figured this was her job and she probably just wanted to keep me, a steady income, around. She started doing other favors like making me dinner, and my mind started going crazy and had to know what was going on. So I confessed that I liked her and hoped that was okay, and asked her to clarify what she had been doing and what it meant. Turns out she totally had feelings for me. We decided to date and now we're getting married. Ironically, I ended up in the only healthy relationship I've ever been in. We just clicked on our first date, laughing and having so much fun, and felt like best friends after the second date. We are getting married soon. My boyfriend is so smart, so hardworking, and such a good dad. He's so sweet and nurturing to me. He's actually the only boyfriend who has treated me like an actual person and cares about actually knowing who I am. If I listed all the things I love about him, my comment would be so long that nobody would read it. Being a sex worker is not what most people imagine. They think it's getting treated like garbage by perverted, hideous sadists, just gritting your teeth to get through horrible, disgusting experiences. I mostly only met guys who were divorced, worked from home, and new to the area. Just hadn't had any luck on dating apps. They were all normal guys with good education and a good head on their shoulders. Just lonely, or too busy, not interested in having a girlfriend at the moment. I only slept with guys I enjoyed spending time with. It was actually a big step up from the guys I had normally dated. The few people who did treat me like a piece of garbage to throw away were people in my life who judged my choice. You all need to go read this. My fiance registered signee is a stripper at a bikini bar. I used to frequent her club because my friend's sister was a bartender there and would hook me up on my bar tab. I met my fiance registered signee and got to know her pretty well over the next 2.5 years. Then one night we were both there for my friend's, the bartender, birthday and got pretty drunk. She told me she had a crush on me and then later said she wanted to go home with me, which she did. A year to the day after that I asked her to marry me, and I've been in the best relationship of my life for almost 4 years. When I was in Amsterdam I did a red light tour, and the tour guide told us how when he was young and inexperienced he shopped around the windows for a while, found the beautiful woman he'd ever seen, and kept coming back until he worked up his nerve. Eventually he went in, stayed in there talking to her until about 4 in the morning. Then she took him back to her place. That was 9 years before he told us the story, and they'd been together since then. She still worked as a sex worker and he was so open about everything. It was really interesting to get such an outlook from a tour guide. I'll start with my story to get the ball rolling. Former sex worker. When I was 18 I began seeing a married man in his early 40s who treated me with respect, genuinely listened and helped me with my school, and we hung out a lot too without having sex. After about 3 months of seeing him almost every day I started to become attached. Then one day I told him that I thought I was in love with him and he told me, "I still love my wife. I only keep you around for your head game." I was devastated and never saw him again. I had to travel out of the country to attend my sister's wedding. The best man was my ex-fiance registered sign. He dumped me, so I couldn't stand the thought of going alone. So I hired an escort to go with me and pretend to be my boyfriend. But he ended up being the most wonderful man and we fell in love. Worth every penny. I used to do security in a brothel for some extra cash in my early 20s. There was a girl working there who seemed to be trying too hard to fit into the lifestyle. It just seemed too much for her though. She was hot AF. I had a buddy who used to frequent various brothels around the city. When I told her about this girl, he quickly became one of her regulars. One night he appeared as usual for a visit. After about half an hour, he ran out the door carrying this chick in his arms. "I'm kidnapping her" was his only explanation. Apparently, he had broken down crying during the visit and my mate decided to take matters into his own hands. They both disappeared for a few months, leaving me to explain to the brothel owner how I had let one of his girls get stolen. Lol. Luckily, my buddy was well known by reputation as a bit of a psycho in the city. He wasn't at all a psycho, just big and really good at fighting. Other than that, he was the nicest guy you could meet. Joey kidnapped her was enough of an explanation to get me off the hook. As it turned out, he had taken her traveling the world for a few months. They were in a steady though tumultuous relationship for a few years after they got back and the girl got out of the game for good. It didn't last, but they were great together for a while at least. I've never used the term John, just client. While I haven't fallen head over heels for a client, I definitely have a few clients that I love. It might weird them out so I wouldn't tell them, but it's the truth. You meet some very interesting, caring people in my line of work. Really happy for the fairy tales people are telling here, but these stories don't end well often. I had a second degree cousin who was a sex worker in Brazil. Started doing it as a teenager, since her father left her sick mother without a penny and she was a very beautiful girl. Worked as a sex worker for a few years and ended up meeting a Spanish tourist when she was 22 or 21. The guy was Prince Charming himself. Came back to Brazil a few months after meeting her to marry her and take her to Spain. Was really kind with the entire family. Flooded everyone with gifts and sounded like a genuine nice guy. A few months passed after their marriage and things seem fine. She gets to visit the family. Sends updates constantly. Out of nowhere. Silence. She completely disappears for years. It was the 90s. Before cell phones or social networks. Her mother tried to reach the police, but it was useless. After around 8 or 9 years of silence, she calls back. According to her, the guy was extremely jealous and abusive. The first signs were weird, but nothing terrifying, in her opinion. But things got worse, with physical and psychological violence, forbidding her of leaving the house until it turned into a situation where she was completely locked off the external world. She ended up running away from home after many tries and took refuge on a church. While living at that church, she remembered one of her cousin's phone number, one of the few she memorized, and managed to call the family back. Most of us thought she was dead by then. That was in 2004. She had been missing since 95-96. Now she is married and living in Spain with a regular man she met at the church. I worked as a dancer in LA and I met my husband at the club I worked at. We got married last year and have a 2-year-old. We are madly in love and no one knows how we actually met. Haha. Our life is beautiful together. Most people don't realize most of sex work is actually just getting to know someone very intimately. Lots of clients just want to talk, to have a bond, to forget something. Sometimes that bond is simply business, but it's no surprise that people do fall in love at all. I'll keep it short and sweet. I was at work when we met. I quit working and found another job shortly after. We've been together ever since. He turned out to be the love of my life. Sex workers liked me. I'd strike up a conversation outside where they usually hang out, exchange phone numbers, go on a few dates. I didn't care what they did, I just liked hanging out with them. Nothing could ever progress, because every time I started to get to know them better I'd have to go out to see. Most strippers are different though. They try to finesse you, talking about I'm low on rent this month or my phone about yo get cut off. Sex workers would take me out to eat at some hidden local joints and pay for the food. They like to show me new things. I was a regular customer of a cam general back some time ago. After few stints I gradually started telling her not to take off her clothes and just talk to me. I loved her personality. She gave me her Skype, and I thought, okay. And after 1 or 2 Skype meetings I asked her for her PayPal to transfer the money. She was pretty angry because she thought this was a friendship or a dating call and she said she liked my weirdness and general demeanor. We continued Skyping for some 2 months more, and now we are actually friends. I'm a non-linear sex worker. I offer pretty much every service under the sun, and one of those is girlfriend experience. It's basically as it sounds. Plenty of texting and sexting. I really enjoy the intimacy it allows. I took on a client early in the year, a busy businessman bored from quarantine. We had very similar interests both sexually and otherwise. I found out within a week that he lived only a few hours away. After building trust for a while, he came to see me. We've been together ever since. Soon he's completely supportive of my work, and he spends a week with me. Then he'll go back home and spend a week there. We're shopping for apartments in my city now, and will likely be moving in by the 1st of December. I never could have predicted this. I've always been good at being genuine and intimate without opening up that part of myself that could consider a client a part of my real life, but there was no denying it with him. He is so good to me and it is really enjoyable that I've never been with someone into the same kinky sexual stuff as me. Welcome to I'm Not a Sex Worker, but town, my friend. Where are all thesa sex workers who are falling in love with people named John at? This quarantine has ya boy feeling extremely lonely and I'll take all the love I can get. Joking aside, this should be a good read in a few hours. Yeah. I kept him at a distance cause I was scared of getting hurt. After COVID we started to hang out a lot. I freaked out and pulled back. Ignored him for a month. One day I get a text from him that he's leaving the country in 2 weeks cause his mom's health worsened and he may or may not be able to come back. He was in the US on a work visa. We spent those 2 weeks together. He left and I don't know if I'll ever see him again. Soon after he left my body started feeling off. Swollen lymph nodes, unexplained lumps and bruises. I've been through a million tests since and the major cancers any STIs have been ruled out, but I never got any answers for why my body is acting this way. Last I spoke to my doctor I got referred to a therapist. She thinks I only have anxiety. I've seen a lot of family members die from cancer and I feel I have it too. That I will show more symptoms and eventually be diagnosed with something that hopefully kills me quick. I deeply regret not spending time with him while I had the chance. If I'd known this is all the time I get to have, I would have spent it with him. I met him 2 years ago. I could have had 2 good years. I'm going to die alone with a lot of regrets. Also, because I'm a whore and all, I'm aware it's possible he never really cared for me, or that he's married. I didn't find any evidence of it and his actions spoke he did care, but you never know. I try not to think of it much cause that chapter of my life is closed. It doesn't really matter. I just want to know whether I'm sick from something serious or not. She looked me in the eye as she swallowed my load and then smiled at me and said tastes like boyfriend material. I thought she was just saying that because I paid her $600. But our time behind that dumpster on the corner of Broadway and Market Street was the last time I ever felt connected to someone. To this day I can't step foot in Chinatown or cross the Manhattan Bridge from Brooklyn without thinking of her. I can take the FDR though, because my mind is preoccupied with no one using their ducking blinker. I've never even come a little bit close. Almost all my clients have fetishes that are not my thing. Thus the arousal factor has been low. Never fallen in love with a client, but I do love some of them. My first ever in-person client and favorite regular is an absolute sweetheart and has a lot of the same kinks as I do. Seeing him has the same excitement to it as hooking up with a hot friend. We had to cancel our last session because of lockdown and I miss him a lot. I was a stripper for a short time. A guy in his 20s had friends who worked at the club. He would sit around and drink with the girls and I was introduced to him. He gave me some attention and at the time I had very low self-esteem and I was worth his time or something. I really fancied him. Not because he was particularly handsome, nice, interesting or anything really. I was just really alone and felt unworthy. I would pay for everything we did. I trusted him in my apartment alone. I was at work one night and when I came home my wallet that I had hidden, but not well enough, with $4,000 in tips was gone. I asked him about it and he denied taking it. I was naive and believed him. I heard he was sleeping with one of the girls from the club but didn't believe it. I didn't look after myself and got pregnant. I had a bit of a moment on stage where I cried and ran off and left. I never went back. He broke up with me over text message. I had no friends and couldn't tell my mum. I took a large dose of Seroquel and lay in bed uncomfortable for hours not being able to sleep but was far too uncomfortable to be awake. I was sick. Weeks later I caught a long bus journey to get an abortion. I never saw him again and the thought of him makes me sick. The thought of how I didn't look after myself and how desperate I was for attention makes me even more sick. My ex-boss married a sex worker. We at work and some of his friends all knew about her. He had a child with her, married and still living with her, happily. The thing that stressed him a lot was her expenses were very high. Almost every week she bought Louis Vuitton bags, expensive perfumes and slept all day, woke up 3 to 4 p.m. He came to the point where he didn't have the money to pay our salaries so one by one all left the company. The loan company took both of his cars but they are still together. One of my closest friends started out buying content and Skype shows. We now talk on a daily basis and have visited each other several times. As a matter of fact he'll be coming to see me in a couple weeks. We duck and say we love each other and ultimately we are kinky pals. I would call it a casual long distance relationship as we are not pursuing anything different but are appreciative of our place in each other's lives. We say we are BFFs with benefits. I had my first romantic encounter with another woman when I was working as an escort and I now identify as a gay woman. I think she was a nurse or worked at a hospital. She seemed like she was really struggling with a lot of things emotionally, like she was in a pretty dark place at the time. I was too. She made a lot of comments about how she didn't really have any friends and that she was so exhausted. But she was so beautiful. I only saw her that one night which was over 6 years ago. But I do think of her often and hope she's okay. I think I'm the age she was now, and I really don't have any friends or a life outside of work. So I feel like I can't now look back on that weird night from the other perspective. This is my screenplay for a Pretty Woman sequel. It's called Prettier Man and it stars that one guy. You know the one.